Good evening and welcome to The Access Point, brought to you by Living Corporate, which is a digital media network consultancy focused on workplace diversity, equity, and inclusion. Living Corporate centers and amplifies Black and Brown voices in the workplace through digital media production and business-to-business consulting. The network offers a variety of programming, including The Access Point, which is a weekly webinar focused on preparing Black and Brown aspiring and experienced professionals for the workforce by having the real, nuanced talks they don't know they need. During each episode, we examine real challenges you face at work and offer expert advice on dealing with your organization, your boss, your coworkers, and your career. Good evening. I am Edmonds, author, followership coach, and professor of focus on followership. That's right. Why do people follow? That's a little bit about me. Introduce you to my awesome co-host, Dr. Lonnie Morris Jr.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wendy. We're having a little bit of feedback with your audio, so maybe we're going to tune that up a little bit. I am Dr. Lonnie Morris, management professor and consultant. I spend most of my time helping really talented people unpack crazy challenges of the workplace. It is a pleasure to be here on the Access Point as always, and I am super excited about this show. Today, we're talking about something that many of you probably experience, and I can't wait to get our speaker in on this. It's really about the relationship that we have with work, and a conversation I've had with so many peers and so many colleagues and so many friends about the types of decisions we make in the workplace that we would not allow in our relationships, intimate relationships, personal relationships. So there's a lot to do. And the person that is here is set to do this with us, is an incredible guide for this. Our guest today is Mr. Cecil Johnson. Cecil has spent much of his career in pharmaceutical space and variety positions from sales to management and leadership development, demonstrating a track record of individual and team success. He has consistently hired, developed, and led diverse teams and critical initiatives to create innovative, business relevant talent and organizational development strategies to advance culture, capability, and deliver business impact. There's a lot we want to unpack about that. He is a proud alum of Hampton University, where he earned the Bachelor of Science in Business Management, his master's degree in organizational dynamics from the University of Pennsylvania, and is currently pursuing his PhD in global leadership and change at Pepperdine University. Cecil Johnson, welcome to the Access Point.
Before we get started, I just want to do the disclaimer. The thoughts and views expressed in tonight's discussion do not reflect the views of any organization with which the host or guest may be affiliated. So we are about to get started.
Thank you, Dr. Wendy. Cecil, welcome to the Access Point.
Thank you, Dr. Lonnie. Thank you, Dr. Wendy. Great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation and really excited to talk to you all and to share my experiences with the audience today.
So there are a few things I want to sort of start with here. But first Cecil, I want you to explain the conversation we had and really talk about this concept, how it came up and how you shared it with me that made it so significant that we said, we've got to talk about this very directly because we've all had this experience about the relationship we have at our workplace. So tell us about what you've been doing around that and what you've been writing about.
Sure, absolutely. So it happened to me. So a few years ago, I had this project at work, and it's one of those projects that we all have been involved in. It's the project we feel is going to pay off our career. We're given a responsibility. You go to, 10, 20, 30,000 hours worth of meetings for. And I delivered it with my team, I think, to a T. And we had a great banquet to recognize different people in the company. And I thought that it was going to happen for me at that banquet. I didn't know it at the time, but the main executive was talking about how this person really led and made a difference on this project and really made an impact. And I'm looking at people around me, and they're looking at me, giving me the thumbs up, and I'm thinking, oh, here it comes, right? And
It
then they
was
call
coming, all
somebody
right.
else. It was coming, all right. They call someone else's name, and in it, I couldn't understand what I was feeling. Like it was, resentment, hurt, pain, betrayal. Even went to my room, called my wife. I couldn't sleep, couldn't reconcile it. Then I went down the next morning, saw one of my mentors, one of my trusted mentors. Just want to make sure one of my trusted mentors that understood me and who I was. And I said, I'm not sure what's going on, but I just feel this way. And he said, I know what's going on. You fell in love, and it's happened to me. And that was it. Like that was the feeling that I had, right? It was heartbreak. And the reason why I couldn't grasp it at work, because we're not supposed to, who gets heartbroken at work, right? Like I felt it, a little in high school, you felt it in college, right? That you get your heart
Yeah,
broken,
yeah.
but not at work. And that's where it started for me. And as I started to talk to people about it, I realized that they were having the same experiences. They were talking about pain, talking about hurt. And I realized that I'm not sure if we're supposed to hurt at work, but I also realized that people are falling in love every day with their companies, and they're getting their heart broken. And they need to understand that they're not alone, and that there is some type of resolution and deliverance on the other side of that pain.
And thank you for setting the stage for us. And I think after you and I had that initial conversation, we then saw something. I went, oh, this is just what Cecil and I talked about. And we saw that Don Lemon was let go from CNN after 17 years. And when I saw that, the first thing I thought was, I bet you his heart is broken, right? And I know what that feeling is like. I've had that same experience with organizations who say, well, we've got to do something. We've got to talk about what that looks like, what people are experiencing, how do we unpack that? Dr. Wendy, have you had some experiences like that too?
I have. And Love Don't Live Here Anymore is just a painful song, right? That's what comes to your mind. That's what
That's
you're
right.
hearing in your ear. But, the reason why we experience heartbreak and for me is because, like Cecil said, it's the love of the project, but the dedication, the time, everything that is expected of you is what you give plus some, just because. But when it gets to that point where you don't get the recognition, and the way that Cecil was put on the spot, there was no way that you didn't know that they were going to call your name. That's how we are committed to our projects. And it is the people, you go to work and you hear people say all the time that I'm not here to make friends. I just do my job. It's an exchange. I'm just going to get paid. They have experienced Love Don't Live Here no more. They've experienced that. That's where they are. And you're like, oh my goodness. Well, you're here most of the time. What do you mean? That's what they mean. They don't know what to call it, but that's what they've experienced.
No, I agree. And I would say those people are lying, right? Because I guarantee the reason why I tell you they're lying, right? Because think about this. It's probably the first thing they think about when they wake up in the morning. They're getting dressed for the job, right? They're putting on the right clothes so that the job accepts them with those clothes. It's the last thing they think about, right? They're wondering if the job wrote them, right? Before they go to bed, because they check that email right before they go to bed. Even when they go on vacation, they're thinking about at times, I wonder if they miss me, right? I wonder if they're going to miss me. So all those things come up, and it's not to fault anyone. We're human beings, right? We're built for connection, right? And right, so it's understandable. It's important just to recognize that you're actually in a relationship, so that you're present to understand and know what's the deal, right? To know what the deal is. And people, unfortunately, at times just don't know that they're even in a relationship until someone wants to break up with them.
I didn't even I didn't even think about the part about them lying about it as much as I begin to try to understand. That's the social scientist in me. Why do you feel that way? So tell me a little more. And really, if we didn't feel that way, there would be something wrong, because we hear the term work-life balance. That's how you know that that statement isn't true. We would not have to deal with work-life balance if only we just came to work for the exchange, right?
Yeah. So let me pose something here, because this notion of being in love with your workplace, or being in love with the projects, or like being that type of invested, and then having your heart broken for whatever reason it is, and it's happened to me multiple times in multiple organizations. What we know about these experiences, particularly in what you just described, Cecil, is that there is a great leadership responsibility in this relationship. The people who are empowered to manage others, that guide people's careers, that make decisions about people on projects, and getting things like this recognition, that there is a great leadership responsibility there. And so I wonder, particularly in the idea of removing the love or the breakup, and even if you aren't exiting, right, there's a breakup even if you aren't exiting the organization, that this disconnectedness happens for us. And I imagine that the sources of being disconnected for people of color might be slightly different. And I'm wondering, how do we get people reconnected when they have this experience? I saw something in Smart Brief maybe about a week ago that was describing leaders' role in creating well-being for the workplace. And so they listed that there are 4 areas that contribute to how people get disconnected, right? So the pace of change, sometimes it's really fast, people can't keep up. There's this infusion of all this negative information, particularly when people have these breakup-like experiences, and then it's, well, I don't like him, I don't like that, I don't like this process. Or other negative information that might be about the organization in the news. It might be just part of what we're experiencing socially and politically. There's suppression of healthy dialogue, and I see that often in places where I am working as a consultant, particularly trying to unpack culture. Like, there are silos, and information isn't always shared to people freely. And then the increasing feelings of being isolated, particularly if you've had an experience like you just described, Cecil, where you go, well, maybe this isn't the place for me, and maybe I'm not in a position in my life to make a move now, but I sort of pull back from that. And the reason I bring up those 4 that they categorize, because they also talk about, and here's what leaders are supposed to do. Supposed to communicate about the changes. That's core change management stuff we talk about all the time. Engage people in problem solving and collaborating about those things. You're supposed to vet the information that you share, right? So, is this valid? Does it make sense? Who was the source? Are we sure these things fit together? Demonstrate courage when it comes to dialogue. So, engage people in difficult conversations. Talk about, this is what happened to Cecil. Cecil's not happy. We shouldn't have done it that way. Who's at fault? How do we identify something so it doesn't happen again? And then, excuse me, and remember that physical presence does not mean that people are connected. And you probably have
Bingo.
all been in meetings where people don't say anything for the whole 90 minutes. So my question around this is, how do we identify the sources where we, as people of color, become disconnected, and how do we correct that? Cecil, start us out.
Yeah, it's one of the things I would say, and thanks for giving that synopsis. I think one of the sources is that we don't, one I mentioned earlier, we don't know we're in a relationship, but probably more important, we may not know how to be in a relationship, right, with the organization. And I'm going to go back to, if you think about just the history and how long we generationally have actually been in the corporate marketplace, right, in the space itself. So we talk about, even if we look at our relationship with organizational politics and it being negative, and how we just want to do a good job, and this perception of this meritocracy in the organization. But there's nuances about how you relate to the organization, how you navigate the organization, that I'm not saying that we totally don't want to engage in, but we don't have these generations of knowledge that are teaching us how to do that. So for us, one, knowing how to be in a relationship with the organization, that's one. The other is, and something that you really touched on, was being included. and being an outsider, right? That immediately is a connection. Two things. One, either we assimilate, right, and be like everyone else in the organization, which means that we have to leave our identity to the side. There's no way you're going to feel whole or close to whole if the agreement is, the unspoken agreement is that you can be with us, but you also have to be just like us, right? That's one. And then
That
also,
means you
right?
can't wear your hair like
Wait
you
a
want to wear
minute.
your
That's right.
hair.
Wait a
That means
minute.
that you have to remove that body art
Mm-hmm.
to walk in this space. That means I need to not see your tattoos
Mm-hmm.
because we're conservative.
Mm-hmm. So that for us as people of color creates that further disconnection, that that separation, right? So you know that you cannot be yourself or as much as yourself as you would like, right? So that becomes a challenge. And as I forgot the commercial I saw. I don't know if you all remember this commercial. It was somewhat fairly quasi recent where they had it was a brother, and I don't know if he was just passed over for a promotion, but that whole day he had the smile on his face. He was taking the fact that he didn't get the promotion. He thought he was going to get it. Um, I think it was his white counterpart got the promotion, and then at the end he just sat there and started crying, and his mask actually just kind of dripped off and fell off his face. It was fascinating, but it's that mask also that we wear all the time in order to try our best to connect with the organization. I think part of it is that we also don't recognize or may not have the skill yet or the experiences to know, okay, this is how I need to relate to the organization. There's gradients. There's not just one way. It's a continuum. You have to decide how you want to play and the degree to which you want to play to be invested in it.
Ooh, interesting.
Wow.
So you talk about the how, and I see it from the why standpoint. We don't always know why we're hired, for what reason, what is it that they want out of us. And therefore, we don't have control over our connection. We're going to go into the job in the way that we do in any work relationship. We're going to work hard, but the very things that we are hired for, our expertise, our knowledge, our skills, those are the very things that are exploited in the relationship. And it's
you mean wait, you mean just because we finally got our cisgendered black female doesn't mean it all works?
Just saying, right? Because we don't realize why the company has hired us. And then when we show our creativity and we're very innovative and we create all these new things and bring the fabulous ideas and someone else gets the credit, we're crushed. But that was the plan. That was the ultimate plan. So there are times we get into a situation where connectedness is just a given because we go into that. There's no, we don't need validation for that. We don't need any prerequisites. We're just going to do what we do. And at the end of the day, we realize that we were used, bamboozled.
I think I read something about that in a book called When Leadership Fails one time.
That sounds familiar. That book sounds familiar. That sounds familiar.
A whole chapter. after chapter.
I think I read about that. That's coming from a place of love right there.
I heard it was like a reference manual, right?
Absolutely.
Cecil, you have any additional thoughts? Go ahead.
No. Dr. Wendy hit it right on the head, and I also would say that if we continue to be real about work, there's a deal that it's a company, right? The company can't feel. Obviously, the relationship is mediated through the bosses, right? Our managers. That's who we connect with most, that we feel and expresses what the organization feels. I would also say that there's organizational processes that perpetuate this feeling of relationship. We all have been in the scenario where that once a year we have that year in review, right? And it's almost like your girlfriend or your boyfriend saying, we need to have a talk. Because you don't know what's going to happen, right? You don't know what's going to happen. Like, you're thinking, hopefully it's a good thing. Hey, let's move in together. Or it could be, I really need you to give me more flowers, or I need you to take me out. I mean, it's that emotional thing about that experience, right? That, and every year we reset that, right? And every year, and throughout the year, we may have scenarios where, look, we've all been it, where you get that pat on the back and it feels like, flowers, or you get that award that you get a few $100s in, and you feel like, that's someone taking out to dinner, or you really do well on your year in review. And it is, it is someone saying, I love you, right? And then, but you have to earn that love project to project, year to year. And that is emotionally taxing. And we all experience it, regardless of what race you are. But when it comes to also people of color, we have that other layer where we're fighting for our space in organizations to be seen as who we are. So it's similar to the person who is in a relationship where their spouse never really gets to see fully who they are.
Do you think, though, that part of this could be the way Black and brown people, especially Blacks, walk into African Americans walk into a workspace is the result of how we work from generational trauma, right? From having to work hard, to wanting to work hard, to understanding that this is just the way you do it. This is how it's supposed to be done, right? Because from the time we're children, we are raised to know that we have to work harder, 10 times harder, and we have to be 10 times better, and we have to go get all of these credentials, and then this happens. So when I think about how we walk into the workspace, it's how we were raised. It's how we were told to show up in the workspace.
Dr. Wendy, I agree with you. Look, I'm Generation X, and I was taught that theory of meritocracy, right? Where you go in, you work hard, and you get rewarded. And what I realized now, and I'm still learning, right? Learning every day, is that work is more than just doing the tasks that you're assigned on a daily basis.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah. Work is building relationships, right? Work is getting people to know you, and you build some level of trust. Work is using organizational politics as a positive, not as a negative. And you talk about generational trauma, Dr. Wendy. I agree. There's also that and I think you articulated better than I did earlier, which is that we have a generational deficit of experiences in those professional spaces.
That's right.
That we're still trying to learn the lessons, right? And I think my kids will learn their lessons. We'll have more because I've experienced this, and then their kids, etc. And we hope someday that we catch up and surpass. But my father, he was a pharmacist, still living, 91 years old, still doing his thing.
Yes.
Got a little girlfriend. So
yeah.
he won't listen to this, so I'm not worried about it, right? But it's interesting because there's certain things that he taught me, but he never explicitly taught me about navigating the organization. But I did interview him about 7 years ago, when I was in my graduate program, and I interviewed him, and he was talking about how he navigated pharmacy associations, how he decided that he was going to be secretary for his association to show that he could be in this officer role, because no one wanted to be secretary. And then because people trusted him, and because they trusted him, then he was able to say, well, how about Cecil? My dad's name is Cecil also. How about Cecil? He could be vice president. Then next he's president. and one of the second Black presidents of a pharmacy organization, the largest independent pharmacy organization in Philadelphia. So those are things, but he didn't teach me that explicitly. I actually had to go to grad school and by happenstance ask him about it. So those are the things. Now, I don't indict him because there were so many other things that he needed to teach me about when I'm driving,
Hello.
being careful about things like the other things that, hey, work will handle itself. I need you to be able to come in and home at night safely, right? Right. So I understand that. I think that we have the opportunity now with people like yourself, Dr. Wendy and Dr. Lonnie, in this space to now close the gap because we're sharing our experiences about how we navigate the workplace, but we're also being very transparent about the challenges and the pain that we have so that our people know that they're not alone, and they're not crazy for feeling these feelings, and that we can connect with each other and help each other through it.
So I love this, right? Because part of what we're saying is that communicating this stuff is really important, right? So, and it's not just what is said, but also what is modeled. And so we already have placed this in the context of, we know there's a leadership responsibility. We know there is some generational trauma of the things we bring with us into the workspace, Dr. Wendy, that we're not clear about how to navigate. We don't always get the things that we might need to know about the work from the people who are close to us yet, which is why we have things like the access point now, because there's so many other critical things about just getting the job and just being able to get you safely to the job we got to worry about. So I'm thinking about communication in the context of this relationship with the workplace. And like you said, Cecil, most of it, since the organization can't feel, most of that is mediated with the people that we have to engage with. And the relationship is predicated on what we feel oftentimes with our bosses, the people who manage us. So I wonder your thoughts about employee communication preferences, right? So how we want people to communicate with us and how that impacts our experience with the relationship in the organization, with leadership, and particularly with well-being. So I saw this study in the International Journal of Business Communication, and it's actually pretty funny, right? To me, it says, emails from the boss, is it a curse or a blessing? And really, they're looking at communication preferences of employees, and do they want face to face? They want managers to email them. Do they want to be on calls? All these ways that we can get information from people about how to do the task, how to connect to the organization, how to be a part of the community that's there. And what they found was the preference from employees was that leaders communicate with me face to face, that there's something significant about being in a space, sharing the space, talking to you, seeing your reaction, having that engagement that is very valuable, much more than email or any other type of communication, phone or what have you. And something else I thought was pretty significant here, that significant, but I don't think it's new information for us, right? That the preference for face-to-face engagement and communication with the people who can help you and shepherd you through this love relationship in your organization, that was not only positively, but also significantly related to how satisfied people were with the job and their perception of how effective their leader was. So if that's the case, what does that tell us about the workplace right now? What do we need to do as employees in communicating our preferences about how we want to be communicated with and how we want that to happen to help us with these connections? And what are the expectations of the people that are responsible for shepherding us through this relationship when it comes to communication around these issues? Cecil.
You said a lot.
I mean,
welcome to the access point.
that was just one of those articles. Come on.
So I'll give just perspective here. So from leaders and from followers is what I grasp you saying, and I think that there's and look, the generation that's after us, after me rather, probably is a little bit better about this, but I didn't come into an organization and say, hey, look, I really prefer face to face, or I really wouldn't prefer. I think it's important for us to share how we communicate, um, how we like to be communicated with. But I also think it's important that as we do that, we just don't stop and say, I prefer you to email me, or prefer you the face-to-face conversation. I think it's important for us as employees to say the impact that has on us. So when I say, Dr. Wendy, when we sit down for our one-on-ones and you share this information with me about how I'm doing, it makes me feel that much more connected to the organization. It makes me
Preach.
feel, it makes me want to go out and do more, that you understand the impact of the medium on which you're giving me the feedback in makes. Now, let me just be fair. Dr. Wendy, I still want you to email me, because then I know it's like actually documented. But in the meantime, I do, right?
I can use that in my
Right.
Come
In the
on,
offensive
we know
meantime,
app.
you got
right,
you gotta have receipts and
right.
relationships.
Gotta have
Hold
a
up
receipt,
now.
right. And that's a part of it, for that. And on the other side, and let me give you a personal experience. When I was writing some of this, right, I was experiencing challenges, um, as a manager, right, and that I had an employee that really needed to take the opportunity to raise their performance. And you're writing, and you're so immersed in the research and the work and your writing that you're not like really you're writing, but you're still kind of afar, right? And then I realized, like, wait a minute, like this individual has been in a long-term relationship with this company, and now I'm stepping in and I'm trying to change the dynamics with them. And
Mm.
and it was important for me as the
Mm-hmm.
manager to know that there's an emotional connection here,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that what I say is going to impact the relationship that person has had with this organization, whether they realize they're in a relationship or not. They're just going to express it and feel it emotionally. So it made me take a step back and actually be transparent about how I perceived they were feeling. And even went into the conversation with saying that, and me knowing like they're miserable. I can, like, like you,
Mm.
I've said this before, like we all been in workplaces, right? Where we can see people and we know like they're miserable, right? They're miserable in their face, their emails, how they speak to you, and me, like, they're miserable,
In the
right?
Mm-hmm.
face.
Right. And
Like the people
they're
that don't turn on their cameras
right,
and
right,
mute.
right,
Wait,
right.
I feel judged right now. Hold on now. Hold on.
And we know that, and for a manager, it's important, in my opinion, to be present about the human being that's behind the label of employee. It's here is one of the and we must reference this earlier around change, Dr. Lonnie. Here's the challenge: the organizations, companies do all they can to make you feel connected to the organization, right? Hey, they want you to have a connection. They want you to have a relationship. They want you to feel close to it. They want you to identify strongly with it, right? Until change comes, and then it's just business, right?
Woo.
Right. But think
Yeah.
about it. There's so many things that are done around it, and I'm not saying that anyone can immunize themselves, right, against some type of misaligned expectations, right? But just because we're just built for that, we're human beings, right? If we had no connection at all, then that's, look, you are the two doctors. Like there's some other clinical diagnosis for that, right? But if we can set the proper expectations and know that we can create a situation where there's a mutual exchange, and that the organization is getting X, Y, and Z out of me. You mentioned that earlier, Dr. Wendy, about, hey, we're pouring in all this. At the same time, employees have the space to define for themselves what they want to get out of the relationship for themselves. And too often, we don't define that. We don't say what we want to get out of it. And we leave ourselves at the mercy of the employer as the partner that's guiding all the experiences in a relationship, but also are defining what reward is in the relationship.
That means we have to talk. We have to speak up. We have to share. We have to let them know from the beginning And that should be on a regular basis, not that once a year thing that just leaves you just so sour all the time.
Oh, we got to talk.
Ooh, y'all know.
No,
Oh, man.
I agree with that. I mean, I agree, and it's some of the people that I've seen do very well just communicate more often. Um, and and but I also want to say this, and I'm not prescribing this. I'm just kind of describing it. But it's also I think as people of color, it's something that my grandmother said to me years ago when I was, going through a breakup. She was like, there's more than one fish in the sea, right? And
That's a granny
right,
statement. Yeah, yeah.
right. And I think that, and I do think that we, black and brown people, I think that we also find ourselves staying longer in places and spaces, and that doesn't mean necessarily leaving the company, but staying longer in departments and situations longer than we should, because I think that at times we confine or we confine our options, right? We don't think we have as many options, and externally or internally. And I think it's important for us to understand the value that we bring, the impact that we are able to make, and to be able to expand our belief in the options that we have in the organization, and not think that we're here at the mercy and we're here as and people are doing a favor for us, but we are here because we're valuable. Trust me, there's not a whole lot of people, not employers, a lot of companies that are going to pay people just because. So we are bringing value. It's important that with that value to leverage it so that we can get the most out of the experience that we can.
I love that.
That comes with knowing your worth.
Yeah.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Love that. So here's my next question. How do we help leaders and managers? And I want to contextualize this a little bit because a lot of what we're saying is about employees and what is it our role to help facilitate some of this and not leaving it up to managers, not leaving it up just to the organization. But we also started out saying that the relationship is often predicated on people in those roles and in those positions, right? So what's communicated, how you're evaluated, how you're celebrated, how you're acknowledged, all those things, getting the flowers, the we gotta talk, all that stuff is related to the manager there. So I'm wondering, when we think about it from our perspective, how do we get leaders and managers the support they need to strengthen relationships with employees? And here's why I bring this up, because I saw this on Indeed, right? It's a list of the things that the manager is responsible for doing in the manager-employee relationship. And they list it, and we make fun of lists sometimes here on the Access Point, but I always bring up, I think it's important to sort of give us a framework for thinking about it. But here's what they have. And you mentioned this already, Cecil. They mentioned transparency. They mentioned calling regular meetings, and that's about communicating to people. They mentioned demonstrating recognition and appreciation. Deliberately avoiding micromanaging. I love that one. Actively supporting professional development of employees. Collecting, evaluating, and reporting feedback. Intentionally discouraging favoritism. I've not seen that one on anything before. Spending quality time with employees and actively seeking employee input. So, and I in my notes, I actually wrote asterisks around spending quality time, because that's something we're talking about here that may not happen. We've got some people, I've experienced it myself. I've worked with employees. I've worked with people who I've coached that legitimately only have a serious conversation with their manager at the performance appraisal meeting. That's it. That's the only time they talk. So I want in this, because I know we've got not just people who are listing on the Access Point who are in the employee role, but there are people who are also in the manager role saying, I'm having difficulty managing this. I'm having difficulty doing this. And I don't even know that my organization has the structural support for me to get it, right? There's nobody supporting me in doing this. So how do we help people in the management role strengthen relationships? What do they need?
Well, remember that everyone who's in a manager position or leader position doesn't necessarily know how to lead. And it's those very types of things that they avoid that are very uncomfortable for them. They're not savvy with learning how to handle difficult situations, so they avoid it. And seeing you once a year is just fine.
That's right.
Mm. Mm.
And even that's stressful, right?
Right.
Everybody be sweating that week, like, oh,
Right.
Right.
I'm just going to tell you that you got the average and it's 2%. Doesn't matter that you were a 10, right? Out of 10.
Yeah, Lonnie, that's a complex question. Well, it's an easy question. I think it's a complex challenge because there's so many. Even what I've seen is that even some of the best managers, or I may say best leaders, right, have a challenge with some of the organizational systems, right, that don't allow them to advance the relationship through recognition the way they would like. I think it was I think you, Dr. Wendy, and another guest were on talking about the performance appraisal process, right? And that in itself, right, impacts all of that. What I will also say is that I also think there's an awareness that needs to occur to help, I think, organizations and managers, let's go with managers because they're human beings, right? Around the fact that I don't know if they always know that there are commitments and promises that are held in employees' minds. Right? That's the psychological contract, right? We get a little bit more academic here, right? That are on people's minds that they're being breached on an ongoing basis. And I don't think they realize that, because at times managers don't even recognize themselves as employees until they get with their managers, right? Everybody has a manager, right? But I think that those things really damage employees emotionally, but employees are taught, right, to mask that, right? And understandably so, right? But I do believe that managers aren't skilled. So when Dr. Wendy talks about, every person isn't a good leader, that in itself, we just want managers to have more than one conversation with employees, right? That's what we're talking about now, right?
Right. That's the baseline.
Right. And I think it's important that organizations really think about the number of touch points that they are required to have with their employees, and that there's some way that there's a checkoff and to document that. And I think that's a really important opportunity. But there's I've had friends in various industries, various companies, and I'm amazed at the spectrum of support that managers get, from hardly any to quite a bit. And it is just very tough. But I will also say this as an employee too, is that, and this may be somewhat counterintuitive because we place a lot of responsibility on the manager. I think you also have to be an employee that a manager actually wants to give feedback to, right?
Right.
There you go.
Right.
You go.
Right. Because look, managers are human. There's some employees where what, this is getting ready to be Armageddon, and if I tell them that they did this wrong, right, or no matter how much I try to massage it, right, it's like, and it is, one of the strategies that I found that has really positively impacted me, is that being able to learn how to ask for feedback in the organization that you're in. Being able to, because at the end of the day, the person who gets honest, good feedback generally is the one that will get the information that they need to move forward, to continue to progress. And we know, what the research says is that people of color, Black and brown people, we don't get as much feedback as others, right?
And we've talked about that on this show before.
Right.
Sure
And that lack of feedback doesn't serve us well, right? Serve us, that means that's a significant gap of information that we are not getting, that we're trying to operate under, and we're just going to be disadvantaged. And it doesn't discount the challenges that it is being Black and brown, and getting feedback, and some assumptions that are made. At the same time, we want to get what we need to get in order for us to progress. And I think it is important that we think about how we are able to extract that honest feedback, and to know what the spaces are and the people are that we can trust, that is honest and is coming from a good place, and not coming from a place that's filtered, that contains a lot of noise, that has nothing to do with my performance and nothing to do with the impact that I'm making.
And I'm gonna tell you why I love that you raised that, because I've experienced in multiple organizations where I went in as a new person, a new manager, sort of on as a change agent for whatever division or unit it was. And when it came time to do performance evaluations, and I would sit in front of employees who had been at the organization for years, and on the self-evaluation, they would always give themselves low ratings. And this goes back to what you said, Dr. Wendy, about sort of the trauma that we bring along. Part of it is also what we discussed about not having proper training for managers on how to build these relationships from the very beginning.
That's
so
right.
They have been so accustomed to being browbeaten in these sessions and being picked apart that they start with the bar so low. And I remember looking at people's faces when I said, oh, no, you deserve a 5 on that, when they had put a 2 or a 3, because they were so used to the manager prior to me saying,
that's sad.
You haven't, this is not outstanding. Now, I've been in that multiple times, right? Wrote about that in When Leadership Fails too. Multiple times where I haven't talked to you all year, and now on this one time in May, you want to tell me there's something I did wrong back in December, and you've been holding me accountable for that, but you never communicated it, and now you want to take down my points, right? So I know what that's like. So there's this trauma that informs how we show up, which also speaks to what you just said, Cecil, because then it becomes, some of y'all the manager don't want to talk to.
I'm just saying. That's right.
I don't want to talk to you.
That's right.
Because I don't know who hurt you in the past and your past relationship with the past manager, the past organization, but you ain't taking it out on me.
That's right.
Institutional harm they're walking around with, which would cause them to rate themselves a 2.
And I would say it's also a protection, right? Because if I rate myself low, then
they're not going to hurt me.
Right. It's not going to hurt, right? I mean, even though if I really went down, it really will, right? Because in my subconscious, I really somehow really want a higher rating. But if I rate myself a 2 and you give me a 4, that's great. If I rate myself a 5, I know past history says, you're not a 5, you're a 4.
Reverse psychology.
Right. You're doing that right. So I think there's a protection of it too. But Dr. Wendy, I'm going to say but, and Dr. Wendy, you said it a few minutes ago around knowing your value. And
that's right.
And I would say that for those who are rating themselves 2 consistently, and they know they're performing at a 5, and they just feel that their organization would not give them that 5. What I will say is that there are organizations out there that will give you that 5. It's a matter of finding the right one and being confident enough in yourself that you can find that organization, that you can find that company that is the right fit for you, that values you, that will be that right partner for you, that will make your relationship that much more fulfilling.
And let me tell you why that is the perfect segue, because I just saw this today in Business Insider. Says that there's a study that just says the happiest employees right now are the ones who job hop. So let's take it here. So if it's not meeting your needs, if you're not getting the 5s, if you can't talk to your manager, if you're only having a conversation once a year, if you were on the stage thinking you were going to get the award, they gave it to somebody else. If love don't live here anymore, we got evidence, empirical evidence that it's okay to leave. It's okay to go somewhere else. Get your flowers from somebody else. Change that man. Change that woman. You can go.
I am loving
Yeah.
it. Right.
I
Go
give you
and find it
permission
somewhere
Right.
else.
to get into another relationship with another organization. Find a manager that loves you.
It does exist somewhere.
It does. I agree. Now what I do want to put a caveat, right, if I may,
Of course.
right? Sometimes there are people you're not a 5. Right, right.
No, you don't say.
Is that right? You know darn well you don't get your expense reports in on time. You know, you don't do the extra work, right? You know that, but yet you still feel you deserve a 5. Now I appreciate the confidence, right? I definitely do. But I don't. But the expectation is off, right? You know, if you see other people around you doing that much more or doing that much extra, whatever. So it's also important to have that grasp of reality. But again, if you do see that, hey, look, I know my value, etc., and this is what I find is that I found that when I've talked to my peers, um, that it's important that they test their worth in the marketplace. They're not necessarily looking to break up,
Yeah.
right? Right.
Yeah.
But maybe they go to the club now and again to see who's looking at them, right? Right,
Let me
right.
see
Maybe
what's out here. Put
maybe
on my
they
good
just
Who's
shoes.
right,
responding
right,
to me?
right. Let me just see. Like, let me slap on this, you know, this cologne here, this perfume, whatever, and put these, these red bottoms on, and or let me put on my, my custom made suit or whatever, and let me just see who's checking me out. Let me just see who might be interested. At least that every everybody wants to be wanted, and let me just see what my worth is outside of this kind. I know what my worth is, but let me see what the marketplace is saying. That doesn't mean that you're cheating. That doesn't mean you have to leave, but at least you can understand where you are and not trying to solely define your value based on where you are.
I love it. Any final thoughts, Dr. Wendy?
One final thought is I'm thinking from a systems level, how leaders can be helped in leading the right way so that we don't have these experiences and we don't experience the breakup. Is that if they are given an incentive to do all of those wonderful things that you listed, the transparency and, don't micromanage, all of those things, it would force them to behave differently. It will force them to think about how they manage and whether or not their management skills, if they need to take a second look. If you're going to be given an incentive because the people that you manage are the ones who are getting the 10s and they have earned it and you feel good about giving them that 10, then the company is going to have to think differently, right? We keep saying we want better employees.
Yeah.
But if you provide the right incentive to invest in the employees, the leaders their style of leadership is going to change. It's going to be impacted.
I love that. We've had an incredible conversation today, and we've identified lots of things for you to consider. So I want to recap the things we want you to take away from this. At the employee level, we want you to remember that this is a relationship. You may not have framed it that way. It may not have been framed like that for you in the past, but think of it that way. This is a relationship. And when you think about being in a relationship with the organization, with the work, consider, do you even know what it means to be in that relationship? Do you know how to navigate those waters? Dr. Wendy prompted us to think about, to understand, why were you hired? Is it different than what you thought? Because wherever that exists on the spectrum for the organization can impact what the relationship looks like for you on the inside. Remember that this is an organization and it does not feel. But the relationship is mediated through people. So the people with whom you come in contact, particularly at the leadership and management level, the executive level, and your peers in your work group, on your work team, in your division, in your unit, are really important to what this relationship looks like and how it all spills out. Share your preferences. We talked a lot about communication, and not just how you want people to communicate with you, but also about how those preferred modalities, impact your experience. Don't leave it up to the manager or to the organization to make all the decisions around that. Expand your belief about your worth and your value. What are your options? Sometimes you need to look externally. Sometimes there are other things for you to do internally. Or is the relationship souring because you've been in the same space for too long? Are you someone the manager even wants to be in a relationship with? Take a deep look in the mirror. Do some self-assessment, some self-reflection. Are you the type of person that people want to have more than one conversation with a year? Remember that you can find happiness somewhere else. Like Cecil told us, it might mean you are dating with other organizations for a while to see what that looks like, but you can test the market. For leaders and managers, you are responsible for collective well-being, and that is at the crux of the relationship. Question, how are people included? What are the things that you're doing to help them feel included, to create systems for them to be included, to create processes and procedures that allow people to show up as their authentic selves and represent that in your space? Understand that connectedness is not a given. In a manager's and leader's role, you cannot take that for granted. People can be there physically and still not be connected to the work or to the organization. I love this one, Cecil. Let's change the approach to the annual performance evaluation from we need to have a talk. Nobody likes that. Not the man, not the woman. That's not where we want to be. As a manager, are you making employees earn your love from project to project? Or is it something continuous that they feel all the time? And we see this in research, we talked about this before. Or is it particularly for people of color that with everything I'm asked to do, I've got to prove my worth once again? Think about how the full spectrum of communication impacts the employee, and whether that means your preference is highlighted or their preference. But how do you mix all of those together to help the employee feel whole and to get what you need? Transparency prevails here. Be present, and Cecil said this to us, be present about the humanity of the employee-manager relationship. That this is work, but these are people. And understanding how people show up and the things that they deal with to survive this space, to thrive in this space, is part of your responsibility. Figure out what you're avoiding. Be real with yourself about your points of discomfort. Address those. Hold the organization responsible for giving you support to work through those so that you can be better in your role, so that you can foster better relationships with employees. For groups and teams, who is wearing a mask in your team? Is their connection being forced? And are they wearing the mask because they're uncomfortable and they're trying to hide the pain? Figure that out and help them. How do your teammates, think about how your teammates walk into this space and what trauma they're bringing from their previous manager, from their previous unit, from their previous office, from their previous organization, and how might that impact how you work together, your well-being, your collective well-being as a team, and your relationships ultimately. From an organizational perspective, figure out what your practices and procedures communicate about your relationship with employees and constituents. And I've had this happen multiple times in consulting with organizations. I can say, hey, what you wrote in this document is amazing, but nobody here is experiencing that. Question realistically, are you forcing assimilation? Are you creating experiences where people are separating inadvertently because of the culture that exists? Figure out how, as an organization, you foster a method of allowing people to connect in ways that work for them. All of this is at the root of keeping love in this relationship. From an organization perspective, create strategies for fostering relationships when the relationship is changing. When things are good, the organization is pretty good. But when you've hurt someone, how do you help them heal? How do you atone? Who's held accountable? Articulate how you're supporting managers to foster the relationships with employees. Most times, what we talk with Dr. Wendy and Cecil about today is most times people are improvising. They're figuring it out, and they might be modeling behavior that was modeled for them. But is that the behavior that you want to persist in your organization? I love this one. Identify the breached contracts. Whose heart did you break without knowing it? What promises were made that you didn't keep? And the last one here, I love this too. Articulate the touch points that managers should have. When we know minimally, it's got to be more than the one-time talk that we need to talk in the performance appraisal. But where should people have connections? How do you create an environment that allows them to do that naturally and with ease? When we consider all of these things from all four domains, Dr. Wendy and Cecil, we always ask this question. If people who are listening choose not to adhere to any of the advice and any of these recommendations, what is the black and brown tax that they pay for this? What is the cost of not taking this advice? Cecil.
The cost of not taking that advice is you'll always have that hole in your soul that'll be wondering, why can I not be complete?
Dr. Wendy.
So I know that there is somebody thinking just like me with Tina Turner. What's love got to do with it? But here's the truth. If you don't realize that you walk into a relationship with your job because you have been enticed by something that causes you to fall in love with the project, the job, the hours, the pay, whatever it might be, if you don't adhere, you can end up getting into that cycle of breakup to makeup. You'll just carry that same baggage somewhere else.
I feel judged right now. I think feel judged right now. For me, I think it's very clear. The things we accept at work are often not things we would accept in an intimate personal relationship. So if you don't take these things into consideration and process them with meaning and intentionality and seriously reevaluate your approach to it, you'll continue to make the same mistakes all the time. And I don't know about you, and I know that my guest, I know Dr. Wendy is married and Cecil was married. I am single, and I promise you that if you don't learn the lessons, God will keep giving you the test. Thank you for joining us this evening. We had a lot of stuff to talk about. I love this conversation. Thank you so much, Cecil. We appreciate your expertise.
Yes, indeed.
And your
Thank
valuable insight. Dr. Wendy, it is always a pleasure to host this show with you. For all of you who are listening, You can listen to the Access Point wherever you get your podcasts. Like, share, comment, subscribe. If there's something that we shared that resonated with you, got a lingering question, an aha moment, thoughts for a future discussion, use the hashtag TAP Reflections. That's TAP for the Access Point across all the socials, and let us know. If you want to join us live, we are here on Twitter Spaces Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Everybody have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.